Mr. President, I'm curious if this would be the time to discuss the Water Department contract?
Councilor C2 still has the floor. I know he had a
Okay.
question with regards to that.
Yeah, I would love Mr. Sullivan to come down and explain, and anyone else who wants to come down and explain that contract.
And the financial impacts associated with the FY18 budget. Yeah,
I think,
you know what I mean.
I think there will be a $25,000 or whatever the amount is, I don't know.
Point of information.
Councilor C3?
Is this part of the fiscal year 2018 quarter one budget report?
No.
Is that how we're interpreting this?
Yes, I think that we're trying to find out if there's a financial impact in the FY18 budget.
All right, so I just wanted to be sure that there's no violation of open meeting law because of an item not being on the agenda.
No.
I agree.
It's okay?
I'll take that risk.
He's right. He's right.
Well, it's a legitimate question. I mean,
I'd
if-
take
no,
the
no, no,
risk.
no, no. Well, Councilor C2 has a question about a contract
I'm
that.
asking a question. If someone wants to sue me on behalf of the question, I want to know what.
Yeah,
they
but
do with
I
the
think,
contract. I'll take that
I think
risk.
the signing of a contract for selling of water potentially could have an impact to the FY18 budget, either
yeah.
whether positive or negative. So I think it's a valid question within the first quarter update, so.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan,
And it does have an effect on the FY18 budget.
I'm sure it does.
So if I could, I'll try to be very, very brief because it's past my bedtime. The issue of the agreement was publicly posted and it was on TV.
Can you speak just a little louder, please? I know you're very soft-spoken, but maybe that's the problem.
Maybe. So number one, the meeting was publicly posted. It was taped. It was on TV. There was no backroom deal. There was no hidden agenda. It was publicized
The
on
water
TV.
department meeting, the water.
Yeah, the water board meeting. The intent of our involvement in the agreement is to support the ratepayers of the city. It's a revenue item to us. The potential revenue is a minimum, if they bring us no water at all, of $25,000 per year, starting in FY18. First payment would be March of 2018. At a maximum,
Hold on one second, Mr. Sullivan. You said it's a minimum of $25,000 a year if they bring us no water, but you mean
if they take no water, if they take 0 gallons, they're still mandated by the agreement to pay us $25,000 per year, just for the right, for the potential to take water. If they took the maximum volume of water, the revenue would be $285,000 per year.
One second now. If you don't mind, I do have the fun, you answering the questions, so I just want to interrupt as I see
Oh,
fit,
please
just to
do.
go through. It was stated earlier, when you were talking about them taking the water, and it was stated, we're going to truck the water to Burrville?
Incorrect. Their truck, their cost would pick up the water from our facility. Their cost would be to truck the water to Rhode Island. The only minimal expense we have is the value of the water. So all of the pickup, transportation, labor, movement of that water is all on the taker of the water.
Okay. What about amount of water? Is there a minimum amount or a maximum amount that they can take?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes. The maximum amount that they can take is 88,000 gallons per day, not 720,000 gallons, as was alleged earlier tonight.
What's the amount, the maximum?
88,000 gallons per day, not 1 million gallons per day, as was alleged earlier
How many gallons
tonight.
can a truck take?
8,000.
8,000?
Yes,
So we're talking 11 trucks a day maximum.
maximum. The expectation of use is 0 to 18,000 gallons per day. So 0 to 3 trucks per day potential.
Why don't you just put that in the contract?
It is. It is already.
No, make that the maximum.
The contract has been signed.
Okay, all right.
But to give a reference of the volume of water, because there's been allegations that we're giving away all of our water, we currently have the permitted ability to sell 14.59 million gallons per day of water. We currently pump and sell approximately 10 million gallons per day. Over the last 20 years, we used to sell close to 14.5, but with the loss of the textile industry, we've lost 4 million gallons per day. We want to sell that water to bring in the revenue to help control the water and sewer rates. So the intent on our participation of the agreement was revenue-based to support our ratepayers to assist in minimizing rate increases. So with the maximum of 88,000 gallons per day, to us, that's a very minor amount of water that would not have a negative impact on us whatsoever.
If you don't mind, Mr. Sullivan, I'm just thinking, if this water is to cool a coal mining plant, they're gonna be able to cool it with this amount of water?
We are deemed a contingent secondary supplier. There is supposed to be a primary supplier where they're getting all of their water from. And if it's true what some of the people in public input stated today, that they need up to 1 million gallons per day, we are not providing that. We're a secondary backup supplier for a relatively small amount of water, by simply signing the agreement, we are automatically getting $25,000 a year for the taking or sale
How
of
many years have we signed this agreement for?
3.
3-year agreement?
Yes.
Go ahead, now you can continue, I'm sorry.
What I would suggest, if there are any further meetings, if the intent is to support Rhode Island, number one, I feel for anybody that's in opposition, but if they're looking to stop a facility, it should be stopped on the merits of the facility, not on a small sale of water. And if there are going to be further discussions, I think we need to involve our ratepayers. I don't know how many times I've been before this council of complaints of water rates are too high, the bills are too high, we need to find other sources of revenue. This is another source of revenue. And if that facility shouldn't be built in Rhode Island, it should be stopped on the merits of Rhode Island law in that facility,
I don't think it's gonna be built, but that's okay.
not on our sale of a very small amount of a backup supply of water. We are not the primary. We are not selling or giving 1 million gallons a day. We never would allow that via truck because of the truck traffic. It's minimal truck traffic with controls within the agreement, no lining up of trucks on Bedford Street, no idling of trucks, properly scheduling trucks. There are a small amount of trucks, and that's all built into the agreement. So this was revenue-based to help our ratepayers, again, repeating myself, multiple complaints here from you, multiple complaints to me from those with bills. It was identified as a source of revenue with minimal cost to us, but a significant return on revenue.
Okay. I'm done for now. With that, I yield. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilor seat 1, Councilor Capaceris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to be clear before I start my questioning, this relates directly to revenue and how this is going to relate to our FY18 revenues. When it comes to this water, is this water that we have to go through the entire process of treating before we give it to them, where we have to put the fluoride in it, we have to do the cycles of cleaning and skimming and all that stuff?
Yes, it's completely treated water. We currently sell that water now to trucks, mostly to trucks, 8,000 or 9,000 gallon trucks come in that have a business to fill pools. They'll come in, fill at our hydrant on the water department property. We bill them for that water. A number of landscaping companies come in to fill their trucks. They fill it up. We bill them for that water. So it is a small revenue stream that is incurred now. It's a process that incurs now, and we're following that same process.
And this is already a question that's been asked of me. What will this reduce people's water and sewer bill by, potentially?
The value of water on the water rate, 1 penny of the water rate equals about $30,000. So at the minimal $25,000 per year, it has the impact of 1 penny. At the full use, at $285,000 per year, it would be approaching 9 to 10 cents value on the water rate.
Per what is it, CC?
CCF, 100
CCF.
cubic feet.
Yeah, okay. So
So
that's
the
a
intent
significant
is with
impact
that
to people's-
potential revenue stream could offset future increases, or at full value, I don't want to commit and promise to a rate reduction depending on the expenses, but that full volume certainly will be a big help to
Right,
us.
and I want to be clear, I'm just trying to get all the information out there so that way we can have open debate about this process. And last, what percentage above what we're paying as Fall River residents are they paying above the premium?
It's triple, three to four times. So the charge is, to them, is 1.2 cents per gallon. Our charge to our normal customers is 0.0033 per gallon, so a third of a penny. So it's 3 to 4 times what we're charging our regular customers.
And I guess the last question would be, did you have full understanding of what this water was going to be used for?
I understood that it was going to be used for a power plant or other commercial customers that Ben Corporation deals with.
Okay, but not necessarily fracking?
I didn't know the background on the details of
Correct.
fracking.
Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. I yield.
Thank you. Councilor C3, Councilor Camara.
Yeah. Mr. Sullivan, where in our Q1 budget report do we find the impact of this issue?
You don't. It's a newly signed agreement, so we have not projected the minimum of $25,000 into the revenue stream. But if the contract stays in place, March 1st of 2018, a $25,000 payment would be paid to us and go into our revenue item.
Okay, now you stated if the contract stays in place, then I thought I heard you at one point say about the contract not being signed. Is the contract signed?
Contract is signed and executed.
Okay, and so, is that action reversible?
I don't believe so, not without potential risk.
Okay, is there specific language in the contract that speaks to termination of the contract?
There is for cause if the contractor violates our procedures or doesn't pay their due funds, then we have the right to terminate the contract.
Okay, are there any options for us to terminate the contract based upon new information? I mean, clearly, you indicated that you didn't realize it was going to be used for fracking purposes. I think there's a sense, at least I have a sense, not being an expert in the field, but I have a sense that fracking is a detrimental process.
There is not a clause to terminate for convenience. The termination clause is based on the contractor not complying with the terms of the agreement.
Okay, not so much about inconvenience, but for an action that is contrary to good environmental health.
There's not such language in the agreement.
I hesitate because we're on a budget question, so I think I should just limit my questions to the budget. But from what I understand, there are other issues surrounding this, issues that relate to open meeting law violations and possible action, lawsuit action because of inappropriate action by the water board. So I'm going to refrain from delving into those specifics, but I do think that there's a need for us to have a public conversation about these matters.
Yeah, I don't find any illegal actions. Certainly, multiple allegations can be made by anyone, and we're happy to discuss at your convenience.
I yield for now. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the first quarter budget?
Go ahead.
We'll start with Councilor seat 4.
Thank you. I just have a question. You said $25,000 for around March 1st if this goes through
Yes.
in revenue? And that's based on how many gallons per day? 18,720?
It's based on 0 gallons.
0
That's an automatic payment, whether they take anything. The agreement identifies the expected average use is 18,000 gallons a day, which is 3 trucks. It then says right underneath, it's acknowledged that they have the right to take 0 gallons at all without penalty. And then there's another item that says the maximum use is 88,000 gallons per day.
So the max is 88? Okay.
88,000.
All right. 88,000 gallons per day. All right. I was just, I must have heard you wrong the first time. I thought you said that the maximum was the 18,720, and that's not what.
18,720 is the expected average,
Expected average, all right, but we could go up to 88,000.
maximum.
Okay. And I'm not even sure how to word this. What is the value of the entire contract? They had made mention earlier tonight, and I've been taking notes that Woonsocket had an $18 million deal. We haven't seen the contract, so could we see this contract too?
Certainly, happy to pass it along to you. So I don't know the details of the Woonsocket deal, but listening to some of the comments, I did some quick calculations, and assuming that the people in citizens' input time were correct, I quickly calculated that at least one of them said the need was going to be 1 million gallons per day. They said 720,000 to 1 million gallons a day, which we are not supplying. But I back calculated on our rates, if we were to supply them 1 million gallons a day, which I would never allow via a truck. If there was a pipe customer, we certainly have the capacity to do that. But if we were supplying 1 million gallons per day at the rate that we're charging them, that would be $4.4 million per year. If it were a 20-year agreement, which it is not, that would total $88 million in cost.
Okay, so we can get a contract, we can get a copy of that. And then the only other thing I have is, this contract was signed on August 17th, correct?
Yes.
So it's October 20-something, and this is just a comment. We're always very vocal when we have revenue streams and good things to promote, yet not a word, not a press conference, not anything about this until this all happened in the last couple of days. And I think that's the thing I find most concerning. I mean, if this is such a great thing for our community and, you know, the community where the water's going, this is something we should be yelling from the rooftops. It's, you know.
I think you've known me for a long time. I'm not one to push press conferences
Not
or
you, but
announcements.
if the administration, you know, made this deal and they're proud of it and it's going to be a great revenue stream, then how come we're hearing about this 2 months after the fact? That's just my comment on that.
Well, just to add to that, though, Counselor, contrary to what you may feel, there are oftentimes contracts that are negotiated that we don't publicly disclose by way of media. We have intermunicipal agreements that Mr. Sullivan negotiates all the time with surrounding towns. And those agreements are all very lucrative to us, and we don't usually publicize those. So at that scale, it's not something that we would have necessarily called a press conference for.
Folks a break on their water rate, perhaps, and it's something that there's always a lot of complaints
But as do
about.
the intermunicipal agreements, again, we sell water to Tiverton, Westport.
Freetown and
Freetown. That's all revenue generation for us. And again, Mr. Sullivan just completed one or more of those agreements, and so but all I'm suggesting is it's not the type of contract that we would normally discuss publicly. So this wasn't handled any differently than an intermunicipal agreement that we would have negotiated with one of the towns.
Just on that point, though, from Councilor C4's statement that she's trying to make, I think the City Council was not even aware of this until a Herald News article, and I think something as significant as this, whether it's a press conference or not, I think the City Council should at least have some foresight as to what's going on. I mean, we're all aware of who we sell water to, Tiverton, Freetown. We've had those conversations. We've seen those contracts in the past. We haven't seen it now. So I've got to state that I think it's a little disingenuous to say that we don't necessarily share that. But again, it's pretty consistent with what we've been receiving as a city council, that the information we've receiving is extremely lacking.
Point of clarification,
Councilor Siwon.
don't we normally approve intermunicipal agreements as a city council?
Yes, because they're either 10-year or 20-year agreements.
I yield.
I yield. Thank you.
Councilor in seat 6.
Thank you. And my question, how do you feel about this now that we realize it's for fracking? Is that,
It's not for fracking, Counselor.
no, but I mean a fracking.
The power plant may be powered by gas that was generated in the Midwest by fracking. but it is not, our water is
No,
not
no,
being
no,
used for
I
fracking.
didn't mean it in
Of
that
course it
way.
is, to cool the
But
towers.
it's still cooling the towers for this
So,
process.
my feeling is if the allegations are true, and if there are true safety issues in Rhode Island, then Rhode Island should be stopping that particular facility, not a small sale of water.
And I believe that the president was right when he said that normally these type of contracts are made available to the council, and this one was not made, wasn't even talked about with the council in any way, shape, or form, and why wasn't that?
It's a 3-year agreement. The agreements we bring to council exceed 3 years, and I believe by ordinance, that's the agreements that do come to council. So the normal intermunicipal agreements go 10 to 20 years. To be honest, this was a relatively small contract. It did not exceed 3 years, so it did not need your approval. And to be honest with you, without the reaction from Rhode Island, I think this would have went along as a relatively small contract with an approved revenue stream for us to help control the rates for the ratepayers.
But I think that contracts that are changing our revenue source, and this obviously, it may be small, it may be large, but when contracts are changing our revenue source, I think that the council should be made aware of it, don't you?
For my 30 years, it's always been any contract that exceeds 3 years needs council
We already
approval.
went through that.
Everything 3 years or less does not.
But we just went through that, but don't you think that the council should be made aware of it?
Certainly, based on your comments, any future agreements for sale of water, I will make sure goes before you at the start.
Okay. I would like to see this particular contract shared with each and every one of my colleagues,
Happy to do so.
and I would appreciate that being made available. And
Sean?
Council seat 6.
You know, I have spoken
7, I'm
to,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm off with my numbers.
Oh,
It's
I
late.
have spoken with Mr. Sullivan earlier throughout the summer because living up near the water department, I've gotten several complaints from some of the neighbors with the water trucks that are going back and forth, they're going up late at night, the gate is open, and they're up there after the sun's gone down, and people are very concerned with that. So this is passed with additional trucks coming in. None of the neighbors there were brought in. And if you look at the water board meeting, it was put in by Attorney Macy in the last hour. No one knew what was going on. It was contingent water. Nobody really knew. They were like deers in a headlight when you watched the meeting as to what exactly this was for. I'm so sick of that. It's like people have a right to know. Oh, well, we'll tell them later. When later? Now that the story came out, I was inundated with calls from neighbors because at least now you have people that go up and get water for swimming pools, people that go up and get water because they're landscapers. But every time those trucks come down Bedford Street, they drop water all the time. I can tell you when a truck goes by because the street is loaded with water. What happens when these people are coming in and there's 11, 12 trucks a day, and it's winter time, and there's schools near there? Was there any provision that you couldn't come by when school was letting out or school was going in? I'm sorry, Terry, I think this is wrong. Doesn't the contract have an extension clause on it?
There are options for extensions.
Okay,
with
and how many
agreements
years are
by
those options for?
2 3-year extensions.
2
subject to
3-year
appro-
extensions,
Subject
so-
to approval by both parties.
Okay, so it's 2 3 years extensions, you're giving them 3 years, then it's 9 years, so we're one short of 10 years to come to us? Come on,
But, well,
it's wrong,
let me respond to your first comment.
it's wrong.
There was an issue with a specific pool hauler, a relatively new pool hauler, who came in at night a number of times. Mr. Fryer and I both met with him personally to address that. It was the same pool hauler that was purging his truck before he filled, that resulted in water going down Bedford Street. We addressed that matter with him. That particular pool hauler is now suspended. His privileges to go to the water treatment facility currently off, he's not allowed in. In all of the decades that I've been involved, we never had such complaints before. So it was one specific new pool hauler, a Fall River business, Fall River resident. We met with him several times after the complaints to get it corrected. He assured us that it would be, and we've issued him a suspension of privileges. He's not allowed to draw water currently.
I just think it's wrong that people weren't notified. Neighborhood is going to be impacted, and they're not notified. This is the biggest problem in this city, is lack of communication and lack of transparency. Hadn't we heard from the people from Rhode Island, we wouldn't have known. And is it fair? I mean, look, 31 out of 39 communities don't want to sell them. The only reason they're coming here is because the Narragansett, 2 members, signed an agreement, and now the rest of the Narragansett tribe is bringing them to court, and Woonsocket is suing them. They have a court case going on. So if they're not going to give them water, they could certainly be asking us for more water at that point. But they're going anywhere. Who goes an hour away with trucks? What you pay for gas and you know, wear and tear on our streets, were we looking at that?
By the contract, we are not required to sell them more water than the maximum authorized amount. So we will not be selling them 1 million gallons of water. We will not be having the number of trucks that were alleged in citizens' input time at all. My expectation is they will be drawing the water from a primary user. They are using us as a backup. I expect limited use of our water. I'd love to sell them a little bit, but I expect to collect the $25,000 and have minimal draw of our water.
Well, I would give a shout out to Commissioner Pearson on the Water Board, who rightfully voted no, in my opinion. Thank you, I yield.
Council in C3, Council Camara.
I'd like to support the Councilor in C7's comments. I think this board is on being disgraceful. When we see a situation in which almost the entire state of Rhode Island is united in doing what it can to prevent this plant from happening, and when I think of the many people from Rhode Island who came to Fall River's benefit when we were fighting Weaver's Cove being a site for an LNG plant, I feel that this is such. I feel like we're an accomplice to a potential crime by being supportive of a company that is clearly not a company that's doing something that's in the best interest of the environment of our neighboring state of Rhode Island. They were there for us, and what we'd give them in return is to be an accomplice to a corrupt and destructive corporate entity. So I'm submitting a resolution so that we can have a full public hearing on this. It seems to me that this, coupled with what we're going through on the bike trail, on the Alfred J. Lima Crookshank River Bike Trail, is just indicative of a community that's not being sensitive to the needs, the environmental needs, the ecological needs of the community. And by not being responsive to those needs, we're also not being responsive to our economic development needs. Because if we're a community that's going to be looked at by our region as being a community that doesn't respect the valuable resources that we have and the valuable resources that exist in our neighboring state, that doesn't do well as we try to sell ourselves as a place that you want to come to spend your money and to be a part of our Fall River renaissance, our rebirth. So I am going to pursue a public hearing in the very near future so that we can bring folks together and let the public come forward and have their voices heard. I have a feeling the voices are going to be on the side of this contract being a contract that, if not written in blood, is a contract that's written in the interest of corporate greed rather than the interest of our earth. And I think it's very destructive, and I am surprised that our Watuppa Water Board entered into this contract without knowing fully what the consequences are and what the consequences may be. So just a word to the Watuppa Water Board, and I think this is a word to the administration as well. Open up your eyes when you're negotiating, or when you're making decisions, or when you're sending orders down to the city, and then expecting us to adopt them by clandestine kind of operation, in the case of the Cookshan River Rail Trail. And in this case, I called Mr. Fryer when immediately this issue was brought to my attention by Erica Scott, who's in the audience right now, and he played like he didn't have any idea what I was talking about. When I indicated that this was a project that was connected to fracking. And and he can respond to that, but that was the interpretation I had from his response, that he didn't realize that there was going to be anything relating to anything that had happened that might be in any way controversial. And clearly, from the action that happened here tonight, this is a controversial act.
So 3 responses. One is, you mentioned crime. There's nothing criminal about this matter. It's a legal matter, and I feel legally we're correct. 2, you identify respect for the environment. I've spent my 37-year career protecting the environment, and to identify, because of this one agreement, I'm out to destroy the world. I am not. And lastly, at the public hearing, I also advise that we put notice out to ratepayers on the loss of revenue, so at least we have both sides of the Rhode Island response, and for our ratepayers that do have concerns about the high water bills that they're paying and the potential loss of revenue.
And I'm going to just add to that as well. I mean, to suggest that there was full knowledge of anything that even remotely resembled criminal activity, even if you just meant that in more of a rhetorical sense because of the harm to the environment, Counselor, is inappropriate. This board made a decision fully expecting that if there was a serious environmental problem with this plant, that the state of Rhode Island was going to deal with it. That there were regulations in place that were not going to allow that plant to move forward if, in fact, it was going to have the kind of adverse detrimental effect that it was going to have on the environment. We're all subject to the environmental regulations. We confront those with our wastewater treatment plant every day. That $123 million loan order that people are being asked to support is a consequence of environmental regulation. And yet, Mr. Sullivan has been supportive of that, and we acknowledge our environmental responsibilities when it comes to water treatment, wastewater treatment, and the like. So to suggest that we are turning a blind eye to the environmental impacts of this decision, I think is really unfair. And the next point I want to stress, this was done purely as a new source of revenue from outside this city that was not going to tax our residents and businesses within this community. And I'm a little surprised because you, of all people, have been very protective of the rate increases that are being passed on to the residents and businesses in this community. Mr. Sullivan has stated that by selling a relatively small amount of surplus water, that we have a possibility of an 8 to 9 cent impact on the rates that our people are paying. People that you yourself would acknowledge cannot afford to be constantly incurring these increases in our rates. So the intent here was clearly to try to assist our ratepayers in this community, to try to keep those rates from either going up or perhaps even experience a decrease. That was the intent. And to suggest that there was any other ill intent or poor motivation, I think is really unfair to Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Fryer, and also the Water Board. That was their primary intent. And I don't think anyone here tonight expected the negative backlash from the agreement before us when they went ahead and executed that agreement. So I think a lot of information came forward tonight. I don't know that anyone at this table was aware of it. You heard Mr. Fryer say that the water is not being used for fracking. So again, it's a matter of interpretation, and I'll let him expand upon that. But I do want it made perfectly clear that the intent was to provide relief to the ratepayers of this community who are seeing significant increases, and we all acknowledge that, in their water rates, their sewer rates, and that was the intent of this agreement. And I would urge you to remain mindful of the fact that that is an admirable intent, and certainly one that this entity, this board, this administration did in the best interest of the residents of this community. And I think that was their intent. And I'll let Mr. Fryer expand if he wants to on the environmental aspect.
Little bit. The question that was posed to me was, are you aware that this is being used for fracking, the water? And I did what? I was incredulous. And as we learned tonight, it is not being used for fracking. They are mixing the fuel that's used for the plant, which is generated, as I said, someplace else. Some fraction of it may well be generated by fracking. And I have my own personal opinion about fracking. But none of this water is going to be used for fracking. My expectation, based on the quantity, is that most of it's going to be used for dust control at the project site.
Okay, so thank you. I appreciate all of your advocacy, and it's appropriate that you should be advocates. I remember fighting side by side with the opponents of LNG. And when those who were allies to Hess I considered their action to be an action that was an accomplice to a corporate entity that was trying to pursue something that was criminal against the people of Fall River. So I'm glad we won that battle to stop LNG from being in our community. And I know many of you and many of this council were allies in making that happen. I know from what I'm hearing that the battle that's happening in Rhode Island is comparable, and that they do see Invenergy Corporation the way we saw Hess. They see it as a corporate entity that is devastating their land and being destructive to the environment of the people that live in Burrville and the surrounding areas. And there is a repercussion that occurs on a company that is pursuing a fracking process as part of the process. Now, we may say, okay, well, our water is going to be used for dusting or to protect the dust around the plant. But nonetheless, it's still a piece of the puzzle that allows Invenergy, if that's how it's pronounced, Invenergy Corporation, to continue its pursuit against the people of Burrville in a criminal way. So, yeah, I think that the word is not such that it necessarily means that anyone's going to be going to jail because of being an accomplice to this criminal action. But I do consider what this corporation is doing to Rhode Island to be comparable to what Hess was trying to do to us. And in both cases, I thought that they were doing criminal acts against the environment and the people of our communities, respective communities. And we're one community. Rhode Island, southeastern Massachusetts is a singular community. I really felt that sense when they were here today. So, with that having been said, I'm not backing off in believing that Fall River is now on that massive map of Rhode Island where there were 2 or 3 little spots that were allies to this corporate entity, that now Fall River is one of those allies to this corporate entity. And I don't like being an ally to this criminal corporate entity that's doing action that's destructive to our regional environment. So I think we need to back off, and if I'm lucky enough to continue as a member of this council, I will advocate that we don't renew any negotiations that allow this to happen, and that if we can get out of the current contract, that we do so. And frankly, if there is a lawsuit, which I don't welcome, but if there's anything that was done in the way of a violation of the open meeting law on that water board meeting, and I believe that there are challenges already in process going to the Secretary of State saying that meeting was, in fact, had some issues relating to open meeting law violations. that if that in fact is the case, and if the actions that took place in that at that Watauga Water Board are challenged because of open meeting law violation, I hope that we will not sort of dig our heels in and then reestablish this contract if in fact that vote is considered to be null and void. And there'll be more, I'm sure, on this issue, because it will not go away. The environmental advocacy appropriately is growing, and it should grow, because we're not talking about something that can be pushed, that can be kicked down the road. We're cleaning up our environment. We've closed down the dirtiest power plant in New England across the river, and we need to continue to pursue a sound, clean, sustainable, renewable environmental policy that does not include using diesel fuel for the promotion of an energy plant that, again, is destructive to the environment and is criminal in what it's doing to the people of our Commonwealth and to the people of the state of Rhode Island.
Counselor, well said, but I think we're kind
Well said.
of going down a
I yield.
different path. Thank you. Any further discussion with regards to the budget? Counselor Siwon?
I just want to remind people that there's an open meeting law training next Monday. I yield.
Counselor in seat 5.
Paid announcement.
I was just, I'm listening to the comments, everybody's wondering about the open meeting law. It's like, we're having a discussion that's really not on the agenda. My concern on this was on the total amount of $25,000, then it was like $285,000 per year annual, which I guess that's could be considered a lot of money, but 11 trucks on a daily basis going up and down Bedford Street, the damage that would be caused by, and they say it right here,
8,000.
bed and water and heavy transport, concerns me. That's a big concern of mine. But as far as that's concerned, I mean, I can understand what the motivation was. I won't go as far as some of my colleagues as to some of the comments. I am concerned with the activity of this power generating plant. And I'm very concerned that, again, we seem to be, last minute we get this information, and it concerns me because I like to be informed. But I'll save that for another day because I don't think this is going to go away, and we are going to have a public hearing, and I'll have some more comment at that time. So, and as far as the timing goes, I'm all set. I'll yield.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Seeing none, I just want to again clearly state that I think the conversation was well within the scope of the budget. We heard from the administration that there was financial impacts to the FY18 budget and potentially FY19, so we were within the scope of discussing the FY18 budget first quarter, so I don't anticipate any open meeting laws, or if they do, I don't think that they would be sustained by the AG's office. That being said, I'd like to thank the folks at the table.
Whereas it is a regular practice for all public utilities contracts for the sale of municipal utilities to come before the council, before the Fall River City Council for its review and consideration. And whereas now it is realized by this city council and the general public that the city of Fall River has contracted to sell water to a Burrillville, Rhode Island energy company without prior knowledge of the city council, and whereas the Watauga Water Board passed this contract of sale on a 2-to-1 vote on August 17, 2017, whereas this contractual agreement constitutes a potential for litigation by third parties, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council Committee on Health and Environmental Affairs convene a meeting and invite members of the Watauga Water Board, Corporation Council, representatives of the Burrillville Board of Selectmen, representatives of Invenergy Corporation and Ben Water and Heavy Transport to discuss this contract and service to ensure that the City of Fall River will not be a co-defendant in any litigation, and to assure this council that through this contract, the City of Fall River will not be environmentally and/or economically responsible in any way for providing water for what may be an environmentally damaging activity in the nearby state of Rhode Island.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Very succinct.
Try to be.
Motion was made by Counsel Mitchell, seconded by Counsel Kamara. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.